Welcome to Moving Panels One Shot. Let's have a nerdy little conversation. Today we are going to talk about, we're about a week away from when this episode will be released from the theatrical release, and it is just going to be a theatrical release of is it The Legend of Shang Chi or is it just Shang Chi?
Shang Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, I think.
That's it. It's Shang Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. I wanted to put The Legend first and be The Legend of Shang Chi and the Ten Rings. So Shang Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. We've gotten 2 trailers prior to this, which is a lot more than we can say for the next Spider-Man movie. But we've gotten 2 trailers out of this, and joining me today to kind of give you a little bit of a history lesson, a background, if you will, of Shang-Chi, since he is a lesser-known character, I have my good friend Chad. Welcome to the show, Chad.
How's it going, Larry?
It is good. I'm excited about this one. I will admit, I did not know a lot about Shang-Chi prior to this, other than, and I don't know if you remember this, so when Avi Arad was in charge of Marvel Studios in the 90s, early 2000s, this was supposed to be a movie back then.
Jackie Chan was being looked at for it. Yeah, no, I remember that.
Yeah, and it got put on hold when they were going through their whole change, and now he's back. And so let's give you a little bit of background. So Shang-Chi, the character, was created by writer Steve Englehart and artist Jim Starlin. Englehart would actually later go on to work more for Malibu Comics, and he would create pretty much their universe. He actually had a character, Nightman, that was turned into a syndicated TV show in the 90s. Do you remember Nightman?
No, I do not.
Oh, you need to look that one up. I remembered it loosely, and then I looked it up, and I just watched like the opening of it, and I went, "Wow! Like this is Sci-Fi Channel low budget 90s right here."
Awesome.
And then Jim Starlin, probably more famous in his other creations. You can thank him for Gamora. You can thank him for Drax, and you can thank him for Thanos.
Yeah. I also kind of liked how this is a cool tie-in in the sense that this one comes full circle. Most of our properties kind of come from, pure old Golden Age comic books kind of stuff, and now are made into movies, whereas this was a comic book inspired by movies. Not a specific movie character, but, the explosion of Kung Fu stuff in the early 70s, and this is a direct response to that by Marvel, and but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Well, and again, we can go ahead and get into it. I do want to mention, though, Jim Starlin, going back to Jim Starlin, created Thanos, then he leaves Marvel for DC, where he really just creates Thanos again because he created Mongol.
Right.
Just a fun
Great
thing.
artist, though. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, Shang-Chi was pretty much a response. He was almost created out of spite because Marvel had wanted to acquire the rights to the show Kung Fu.
Right. Which was being made by Warner Brothers, who owned DC. So, of course, they're not going to license it to Marvel. Yeah.
No. So they... So they decide to do their own Kung Fu character, and they create Shang-Chi, and then they draw him, especially when you look back at the 70s run, they draw him to look like Bruce Lee.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, he looks exactly like Bruce Lee.
It is, very soon after, oh good grief, the posthumous movie that Bruce Lee... The famous dragon one. Why am I losing my mind?
Dragon?
There we go. Like Enter the Dragon had just come out. Wow, that just totally escaped me. Enter the Dragon had just come out, and so Kung Fu was everything. So, and of course, there's the legend that Bruce Lee was supposed to be the main character in Kung Fu that David Carradine plays. Yada yada yada. So you have all that going on, and Marvel felt like they needed to do this, and it's a one-off. It's not. He was never meant to be like a lasting character. And it's actually pretty impressive that it becomes you wouldn't call him a main stable character, but he has a long run of his own comic.
Like I said, I didn't really know a lot about the character. I was familiar with the name, but yeah, you do some research on this and you go, well, dang, this guy's kind of just popped up everywhere.
But I mean, he had his own run. Master of Kung Fu ran for 109 episode or series or something. I mean, it was a fairly long run of comics, and that's after it began, as a special edition. So
Yeah, so he debuted as Special Marvel Edition was the name of the comic.
mhm.
It was the number 15 back in December of 1973. But like Chad's saying, they would eventually rename it and call it The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. And then eventually it becomes The Hands of Shang Chi, Master of Kung Fu.
Yeah.
So,
real short, concise titles.
yeah. But which is funny because that was actually the title of the issue for the Special Marvel Edition. Like the title of that issue was
Right.
Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu.
Right.
But for those of you who don't know Shang-Chi, not actually a superhero. He's just a master of the martial arts, master of Kung Fu. He was trained from pretty much birth to become the greatest fighter the world has ever seen.
A living weapon.
Yeah,
So
a living weapon is what they let it known as. Pretty much he's unmatched in his Kung Fu ability. But he was also born in kind of his, your heroes have to have some horrible part to their origin. He was born to carry the cruelest curse in mankind's memory, as they stated in the comic.
Yeah.
Because his father was the most infamous villain, Fu Manchu.
Yep. So this is a problematic origin story.
Very much so.
On multiple levels. So this is a spin-off from novelist Sax Rohmer's licensed property, Fu Manchu. So this goes back to, I think, the 30s. I didn't do a super deep dive on the novels, but it was a pop thing for 40 plus years by the time that this is acquired by Marvel. Apparently it was only acquired. There's not a lot of research out there. It's not easy to find like what the terms of the contract were, or any of that kind of stuff, the licensing. But apparently it was, both sides thought this was going to be a pretty short run. They were going to do this one little story about the son of Fu Manchu, and it would be over, and everything wrapped up. But people liked the character that Marvel created, so they had to drop Fu Manchu and retcon, as happens a lot in comics, his origin story. And it wasn't actually Fu Manchu. It was, this other character, and all this sort of stuff. So
yeah, they lose the license with Fu Manchu, which pretty much there was no chance of getting it back. And then once there was no chance of getting it, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't know who Shang-Chi is. Because once they weren't allowed to get the license back to Fu Manchu, that also pretty much prevented them from reprinting the stories
the original
of Shang-Chi.
Right.
Yeah, because they can't use that character at all. So they did, I actually put this down. It wasn't, though, until 2010 that they actually retconned and changed his father. So you're talking, 40 years before they would actually change his father. But I want to go back to Fu Manchu. So a lot of people, of course, would probably think of the Fu Manchu mustache, but do understand, for those of you who may not be familiar with Fu Manchu, this was a very racist character.
Yeah. It's just the evil stereotype of Chinese culture in the early 20th century.
Well, it was during the Red Scare. And so that played a big factor into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all of the worst of how American culture in particular treated Chinese immigrants and Chinese culture in general, and it's not super great. Like it does not age well at all.
In the first issue, the MI6 agent that Shang-Chi meets up with, and the one who tells him his father is evil, allows Shang-Chi to realize, hey, I gotta actually fight against my father. He actually calls Fu Manchu, in that issue, calls him the Yellow Devil and the Inhuman Yellow Fiend.
Yeah.
I mean,
even to that point, like reading those issues, Shang-Chi himself is colored like a cartoonish yellow, almost Simpsons yellow. It doesn't age well.
No, it doesn't.
Thankfully, the story is a little bit better than the racist content and time it was created in. But
and then throughout the years, we would see Shang-Chi team up with the other kind of martial artist characters like Iron Fist, the Daughters of the Dragon,
Right.
Characters like that. He kind of faded away in the 80s because, like we were just talking about, the Kung Fu trend had kind of faded out. So Kung Fu trend's fading out. They lose the Fu Manchu license, so Shang-Chi just kind of fades off into the background. And I think he pops up a little bit here and there, but he doesn't really become a main character again until, like I mentioned, 2010, where he actually becomes one of the secret Avengers.
Well, he does. He is included in little runs all over the place. Like he
never
goes away.
Yeah.
And he's virtually in every team you can name. Like he gets passed around.
Yeah.
Really well. You could tell that writers at Marvel kind of held a special place for him for whatever reason. He is a member of almost every team you can think of, with the exception of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four.
He worked with the X-Men.
He did work with the X-Men. Well, with Wolverine in particular, and he helps track down Phoenix at one point because she's put up the psionic block and nobody can find her. And I will very slightly disagree with you when you described him as just a regular human. So I think just him being in this world, it's not wholly believable that you could just raise a kid to be a fighter on the equal of all of these superheroes, which you have people like Ares in one episode or one issue describes him as one of a handful of mortals throughout time he could count that were on par with the gods and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So but they use the device of chi as this like mysticism that gives him some superhuman powers.
Yeah, and he can fully control his chi.
And there's actually some really cool episodes about that, but I keep saying episodes, issues that use that device, but he is fully in control of his chi, and it allows him to do some pretty superhuman things, both just like strength, speed wise. It has since kind of been retconned, but he teleports.
He can duplicate himself.
Yeah, yep. And so you have a few powers where you're like, okay, and then they just kind of let him go, and you never see those things again. But a mental master. But I brought that up because of what I was just talking about when he's interacting with the X-Men. He's the only hero that can find Jean Grey because he can sense her energy and on the chi plane kind of thing. So they do use a little bit of mysticism with him, but he's obviously not a master of the mystical arts like Doctor Strange or anywhere close to that level. But he's not exactly Batman, where he's totally limited to his humanity.
Well, and I think when they retconned it to give him a different dad, his dad, who, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, was Xing Su. Xing Su was actually supposed to be like an immortal wizard or warlock of some sort. So, that does give him, like, his blood does carry some form of mysticism, some form of power.
Other than human.
Yeah. And of course, I do think that it's that Zensu storyline that is going to be more what this movie follows. And I'm only saying that because the Zensu was the leader of a group called the Five Weapon Society. And then eventually Shang-Chi overthrows his father and he gains control of the Five Weapon Society. And so I'm loosely tying that into what potentially could happen in this movie.
Yeah. With
the fact that we have seen Shang-Chi's at least going to gain control of some of the power rings. So.
It's according to how closely they follow the books, because he actually masters, through the use of chi, he masters 9 of the 10 rings power, independently of having the rings in the comics. So he can do several of those things using this chi device. But that aside, I kind of think that some of it's going to pretty closely mirror the Fu Manchu storyline. That original book really is a pretty good read, even though, it's obviously dated in the sense that they weren't as worried about subtle storytelling as we are today. And so, a quick synopsis of it is this kid who's been raised to be the living weapon by his father his entire life, thinks that his father's a good guy, gets sent on a mission by his father to kill, the evilest man alive that's been foiling his father his whole life, kind of thing. Murders an old man in his sleep after a short internal ethical battle with himself. And then the MI6 agent that you were just talking about corners him on his way out and is, remorseful and what have you done? Why have you done this? All this kind of stuff. And Shang-Chi then questions him and is like, why would you, defend this evil man, kind of stuff. And the MI6 agent blows up at him and he's like, you want to talk about evil? We've been fighting your father our whole lives and all this kind of stuff. And so starts telling him all of the stories about what Fu Manchu's really been up to. And like the Mandarin, he is an individual who's on a quest for world domination. He thinks he's the only person who can right the wrongs of the world, kind of thing, and has talked himself into that. So Shang-Chi goes to his mom, who, I'll talk a little bit of a parallel about this later, is an American woman. He goes to his mom, and another part that's not super PC by today's standards, she's just a gold digger. Like, she just was like, yeah, well, I married your father for power. I never loved him. He's a horrible human. And, and so you could be pretty critical of how women were used in this particular book. And, but she does say, that he is all of the things that he was told previously. So then Shang-Chi goes and confronts his father, and probably some of the best writing of the book is Fu Manchu defending himself at that point. That like you
which is
see,
always a great villain.
Yeah,
the villain. Yeah,
he turns
when the
it
villain
around.
Truly believes that what he is doing is for the good.
Yep.
And if you can write that well, it makes a great villain.
Yeah, but he gives this monologue about, like, when people have free will, you see what they do. They go to war. They destroy one another. They ruin the environment, like all this kind of stuff. And you're sitting there kind of like, I don't know, I kind of get this guy a little bit. Like, but anyways.
So again, there's just kind of some background there about where this character comes from. Obviously, the MCU version of him is going to kind of bring him to a new audience.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're already changing his father, which for a lot of us, we're enjoying this, that we finally get the real Mandarin.
Yep. So some people call it a retcon, but I don't. I think it was planned. There was the short film released after Iron Man 3 that gave you the real Mandarin's henchman hunting down this terrorist who was just an actor.
Ben Kingsley's character.
Yeah, so you got that. So he was already kind of introduced, and there's actually a lot of lead up to this already in several other movies, if you guys want to go out there and start looking stuff up. So the emblem of the 10 rings is used in several sequences throughout other movies. The only one that I can remember off the top of my head, I should have written these down in my notes, but I didn't, is in Ant-Man, when the bad guy is talking about that he's going to sell the Yellow Jacket. He's got a room full of people that are potential buyers. Well, one of the dudes, if you look real close, has the 10 rings emblem tattooed on his neck. It's peeking out from under his collar. But there are several other times that you see that through the movies. So they've obviously been wanting to bring the Mandarin back and use him in a bigger way. So I'm pretty excited about this. Me and Laramie were talking before we started, and I got into comics in the very early 90s, and Iron Man was one of my favorite properties. And so that was when the Mandarin was really brought back. He had been around since the 60s, but he was kind of a little bit of a listless character that was used in several different runs, but never really had his arch enemy until it was really cemented in the 90s as Iron Man. Even though, I mean, that's how he was introduced, to be fair, but that's where I came to see it. So I'm looking forward to this movie a lot because of that connection. I'm really happy to see the Mandarin show up here.
Yeah, so I can't help but mention the fact that there are, at least with the villains, there's a lot of connection to Iron Man here.
Yeah,
because we've got obviously the Mandarin, and then we're going to get into another one in a little bit. I do want to point out really quick, before we move on, I want to talk about the guy that's playing Shang-Chi, Simi. How do you pronounce it? Simu Lee or Simu Liu?
I think it's yeah.
Yeah, I apologize for mispronouncing it. I get a kick out of the fact that he's appeared in other things, and a lot of it is comedies.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very curious to see his take on this character, who's never really been seen as a comedic
no
character in the comics. Very serious. So yeah, very curious about that. I very recently was watching him on Netflix on the Canadian show Kim's Convenience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just
well, and to your point, his best friend in the movie is going to be played by Ronnie Chang, who is a stand-up comedian. So yeah. I think we are going to get a little more Ant-Man-ish.
And then you got
movie out of this.
Aquafina as the I don't know, sidekick, whatever she's supposed to be. So yeah, I get a kick out of that. So, but let's get into more with the Mandarin. We've got the 10 power rings, which in the comics are actual rings that the Mandarin wears. The movie seems to be leaning more towards them being like bracelets, kind of, is what they seem to appear to be. I don't mind that because it kind of separates it from the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah, and I think that was definitely the idea. But let me back up real quick and give the Mandarin his due. He's a favorite character of mine. So he is introduced in Tales of Suspense number 50 in October of 1964. He's a product of the great Stan Lee and an artist named Don Heck. And it's right off the bat, pretty interesting run. He's a kid in China who like Shang Chi is the product of a Chinese father and an American mom. But he separates himself really quickly and becomes a pseudo-dictator of his own little area of China because he finds a spaceship.
Yeah, which is where I was getting into, yeah. And, so I like I said, I like that they're doing the bracelet thing because it does make it more alien looking.
Yep. Well, it makes it kind of specific alien, if you think about it, because these aliens are dragons.
Yes, they are dragons. So the alien
and the
race...
finger of a dragon, you would kind of think, maybe a little bigger than a human finger.
Yeah. So the alien race is called the Makulan. I couldn't actually find how Marvel expects you to pronounce that, but it's Makulan. So I'm pronouncing it Makulan.
The planet is maybe is Maklu 4. I think it is.
So I would think it would be Makulan. But yeah, alien race of dragons, pretty much, and that's important to mention because if you have paid close attention to the trailer. Apparently Shang-Chi is going to fight an underwater dragon because it does look like he's underwater.
You also have a couple of scenes that are clearly in the past where you have, ancient Chinese armies fighting one another. And if you look in the sky, there seem to be some dragons. And I think it's going to get, that is definitely going to get tied in. Which,
going back to our connection with Iron Man, can't help but point out that another one of Iron Man's big villainous characters is a giant dragon named Fin Fang Foom.
Yeah.
So could we get Fin Fang Foom out of this?
Well, Fin Fang Foom is awakened by, after many other people. That's a whole other comic run. He was actually introduced for the first time in 1961. He predates the Mandarin. and is used all over the place. Like, he is definitely just this strange, independent, weird character that they bring up when they need something Asian and fantastic. And so he gets used until the 90s, when it gets solidified in exactly what you're talking about. So we get the story of the Mandarin waking up Fin Fang Foom, and they're using one another, and the Mandarin in particular doesn't realize this at first. But the dragons, because it's a plural, there's actually more than one of them still, are using the Mandarin to take over the world, which was what they originally came here to do, apparently. And then the Mandarin has to join forces with War Machine and Iron Man to defeat Fin Fang Foom. And then they have an on-again, off-again relationship ever since then. So,
yeah, because when the Mandarin discovers the crashed spaceship, and it's, I should have written it down. The dragon inside of it is a cool Vox, I think.
And he's dead.
Yeah. He's dying.
Yeah.
Because he does warn the Mandarin about the rings. Because you end up finding out not only do the rings have power, but they are apparently contain the souls of past warriors.
And they're the propulsion of the ship. Like, it's this whole thing. Like, so yeah. But they're really powerful. So, as we kind of get into the rings, like, this is almost Thanos light. Like, this is Infinity Stone-ish power. Maybe not on a cosmic level like that, but...
So then, of course, the Mandarin says, well, hey, I can get all this power from these rings. I'm going to take it. I'm going to leave you to die. And then not only was he already evil, but apparently the rings corrupt him more because, like Chad said, those aliens were not the nicest of people. So those souls inside of the rings are like almost like possessing him. Like, pretty much they drive him to be more power hungry, more greedy. Do we want to get into what the rings do? Because maybe we're going to see that in the movie.
Yeah, I think especially since they're maintaining 10 rings, and if you look at the emblem, the circle of circles as they overlap, like I think they clearly are still using the motif of each ring possesses a specific power kind of thing. So
they get very specific with some of these.
Yeah, they do.
So let's run through them really quick. So here are the 10 powers of the rings. So we got ice, electricity, fire, psychic energy.
That one's called the Lyre, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Then we got a laser. One of them's just a laser.
Yeah.
We've got one that's a disintegration beam.
Which is also the only one that has like a time limit. All these other powers are virtually infinite, but that one he can only use it once and it takes like 20 minutes to recharge. And this is written in the original, like when the Mandarin gets the rings, it's a panel in the book that tells you all of, like, breaks down these funny powers.
Yeah, then we got one that can absorb all light. So I guess pretty much just creates an instant blackout.
Yeah.
We've got one that allows him to levitate objects, which they call the vortex. I didn't quite get that connection, but okay. Then you got an impact beam, which...
You basically can knock anybody down, regardless of... That's kind of how it's used in the books. It doesn't matter how strong, big, whatever the opponent is. Like, he can immediately knock someone down. Yeah. Which, and then got to be pretty helpful in a fight.
Oh, yeah. And then finally, the 10th one is a matter rearranger.
Or as I like to call it, a MacGuffin. A complete catch-all that you can write anything in.
The power of Firestorm. That's what it is.
Even the laser one you were talking about, that one gets broadened as his powers are revealed, over the course of time. It becomes a do all light emitter, so he can laser things with it. He can illuminate something. He can use it to project holograms, so he can try to fool you that maybe he's over here, kind of thing. So even that gets broadened over time.
Well, and I can't help but go back to a previous episode where we talked about the greatest American hero, and pretty much it was he had whatever power was needed for that episode.
Yep, that's pretty much what the Ten Rings give you.
Yeah. So,
to compare it directly to the trailers, because I spent I don't know how you researched this, but basically I watched the trailers over and over again and kind of picked apart the things that I could already tell. So I would be like, oh, I know that character. Wrote that down real quick. So
there are 3 characters I want to talk about. So
yeah. So stuff to look at again later. But you see several of these powers used. You get that kind of strange, very typical fighting scene in Chinese movies of the like very beautiful levitating fight scene kind of thing, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
which Michelle Yeoh is in this movie.
So just on a total sidebar, is she in any way, shape, or form retaining the character she already has played in the MCU?
Who did she already play in the MCU?
She was one of the Reaver captains in Guardians 2.
Oh.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that.
I'm very curious. Is she going to somehow be that character in this particular movie? So was she on Earth, 400 years ago and fought the ancient Mandarin?
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, and here we say this. Now let's be reminded, although what I'm about to say goes from TV to the MCU, Alfre Woodard has played 2 different characters, technically, in the MCU. Mm-hmm. She was the villain in Luke Cage, but then she also played that mom in...
that's true, Iron Man.
Was it Iron Man or was it Civil War?
Yes, you're right. Captain America Civil War, you're right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it has happened before... So maybe they are treating the character in Guardians of the Galaxy maybe as a throwaway character that didn't really matter, because again, this is a big thing, and we can, you may want to talk some more about the rings, but I want to mention this again. This movie is doing what Black Panther did. We're getting an Asian-led, Asian-starring, superhero movie.
Yes.
And it's one of the reasons why, and I'll go ahead and bring this character up. Benedict Wong, who plays Wong from Doctor Strange, you've seen him in the trailer. And I don't know if that's going to be just a one quick little thing, but I saw an interview with Benedict Wong where he said he was honored to be in this movie because it is an Asian-led cast, and it is, the first Asian superhero movie.
That can't just be a one-line. I mean, he's kind of a character or a fan favorite a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fun character.
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully he's not just, there because he made a phone call and wanted to be in the movie for a minute or something. But
well, do we want to get into that, or do you have more to talk about with the background? Do we now want to get into what we think is going to happen in the movie?
Well, let's take a couple of the characters. Let's break down a few more characters from the comics first.
Okay.
So the other ones that I saw in the trailer that I think are directly from the comics, the first one I'd bring up is Death Dealer, just because it's such an interesting looking character. So it's the painted face assassin that you see in one of the training sequences where Shang Chi is a little boy, and then you see him again later when he's clearly been captured and they're bringing him into the fortress off of that helicopter. He's kind of a background character. So I think that's a character called Death Dealer, which is really, really a deep dive. This character was only in 4 episodes. I keep saying episodes today. What's up with that?
It's fine. That's what this podcast is about.
He was only in 4 issues of the Shang-Chi run. And he's a character. His real name is Li Qinglin, and I actually know him because later on, Li Qinglin's son meets up and tries to kill Shang-Chi in a I think it's in an Iron Man run as a side story way later on, and they kind of bring this character back up. He's a double agent. He's also an MI6 agent, and that's he's actually reporting to
Fu Manchu.
Fu Manchu, not to MI6. So he's a double agent in the worst kind of way, and he's given up to Shang-Chi by his estranged sister, who is the head of MI6. So it's this like total double cross of a double cross and all this sort of stuff. So, which makes for good film. So I kind of wonder if any of that's going to come up, because you do see Shang-Chi's sister is cast, and we see her in a few shots in the trailers. So she will also be in the movie. If I'm a betting man, though, like moving forward, I think that this character is unfortunately going to get kind of the Taskmaster treatment. And I hate to make that reference, but I don't think it's going to be anything like from the books.
But will he get treated better than I probably think Razor Fist is going to?
Well, does Razor Fist get treated good in the comics? Like, that's such a weird character.
Yeah.
Razor Fist has been killed by virtually everybody in the MCU at one point in time. Not MCU, in the Marvel comic universe. And it's never explained. That's my biggest problem with the Razor Fist character. He just pops up whenever somebody needs like a weird 007 style villain. All of a sudden, the third, that's the other problem with him. There are 3 Razor Fists.
Yeah. 2 of them were brothers.
Yeah. And one brother's killed. They were acting as Razor Fist at the same time.
But this should be the third one, because I believe it was only the third one that has both hands as razors.
So, no, the first dude had both hands as razors. Then you have the brothers who both brothers, this is hard to follow, lost one hand each and were each given one razor. Well, then when the older brother, William Young, is killed...
No, William Young was the first one. William Scott was the brother.
Correct.
It was William Scott and Douglas Scott.
is the third one. You're right. So when he... and both of the first 2 are accidentally shot by their own people, by the way.
Yeah.
So William is not a good dude to be in these particular gangs, because your friends will shoot you.
Yeah.
And but I agree with you. I think that this is going to be the Douglas Scott. But to your original point, I don't think he's going to get any kind of backstory.
No, he's just going to be this
throwaway guy.
I don't even think they're going to call him Razor Fist. I think he's just going to be this unknown assassin that is sent after Shang-Chi that just happens to have razors for hands. He fights Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi defeats him. That's the end of Razor Fist.
So, go back and watch the trailers again, though, because he loses a hand during the course of the movie. Because when he fights Shang-Chi on the bus, he has a left hand and a razor, whatever, lightsaber right hand. And then later, he's got 2 of those things. So, at some point in the movie, I think Shang-Chi takes a hand from this dude. Which should be kind of fun to see.
So it could be that. And see, this is where I get really worried about them pushing it's going to almost get too campy. Because, okay, so let me explain my thought about this. The non-MCU Punisher. The Thomas Jane Punisher.
Okay, yeah.
Thomas Jane's Punisher fights off several minor characters from the comics.
Yeah.
Leading up to facing off with John Travolta at the end. I mean, you got the Russian, wrestling fan, always think of Kevin Nash playing the Russian, even though he never says a thing. You never actually know he's Russian, but you know that character if you know the comics. He fights the Drifter. I can't remember his name, but I'm worried that that's what's going to happen in this. I'm worried it's going to be henchman after henchman.
I don't think so, because I think all of them work directly for the Mandarin. I don't think we're going to see like assassins for hire kind of thing. I think that they all work for the Mandarin directly, because you see them in shots like, I don't know if he's captured or if he's willingly returned home. I mean, that's not apparent in the trailer, but there's the scene where you see all of the villains, basically, with the exception of maybe a dragon, getting off a helicopter and bringing him to his dad kind of thing. So I don't know. I see your point, but I'm hopeful that it's not going to be that kind of just rogues gallery, as he goes through stuff. But I do want to talk about that. I think Douglas Scott gives us a cool connection, and the reason that they're using that character, because Douglas Scott was written into Madripoor later on. He's kind of a key figure as an enforcer for this local crime lord in Madripoor.
Is this how they tie in the X-Men?
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. Yeah, he is not on good terms with Wolverine for sure. They do not like one another. But, I mean, we just got introduced to Madripoor as kind of this hub for, illicit things going on in the world. And so I am kind of wondering, is the Mandarin running most of his operation through Madripoor? He clearly has like some kind of mountain fortress that we're assuming is somewhere in China, that sort of thing. But does he have ties to? Man, what's the like overarching Big Brother character in Captain America in the series just now, the Falcon and Winter Soldier? You remember what I'm talking about? What is that character's name now? Dude, I'm striking out. But this I think this movie, too. The reason I'm bringing this up,
I'm thinking about all the other connections. I'm going okay, so now we're going to go into all these wild theories that people have had about the Disney Plus series. So now this is the way we're going to bring in mutants. There's a connection with Razor Fist and Doctor Doom. So this is how they're going to introduce Doctor Doom.
Well, Doctor Doom makes robots from the brother that died.
Yeah,
he makes copies of that guy.
So now let's try to find a way to get Mephisto in here, and we'll have the trifecta.
But I do think this movie is more tied in to the MCU at large than first glance, and I think we kind of talked about this very much in passing in the other one shot about like where is everything going, coming from the Disney Plus shows after Loki stopped. And I was with you at the time, just like, I don't know, I think this is going to just set some balls in motion kind of thing. But I think just like Black Panther, it's cool that you also made that reference. Just like Black Panther, I think this is way more tied in than we get at first glance. And I think Douglas Scott was kind of that linchpin that made me start thinking that as I did more and more research about this. So I don't know. I think we could see some cool characters drug in. He also is big enemies with Elektra. And we have rumors that Daredevil is going to make an appearance in this movie.
That Charlie Cox
is Daredevil.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm going to take a big turn with that one now.
Mm-hmm.
So with Charlie Cox being rumored to start entering the MCU, because there's also talk that he'll be in the next Spider-Man movie too.
I think that's all but for sure. We pretty much know that.
And then the fact that Shang Chi, as we kind of stated at the beginning of this episode, one of the more, I'm trying to think what word to say, but the group that he's probably the most associated with is the Heroes for Hire.
Yeah.
Do we get Iron Fist? Do we get Luke Cage? And then if we do, is it still Mike Coulter as Luke Cage? And I don't want to say that it'll be the same guy playing Iron Fist.
So, I mean, to be fair, if you really follow the comic runs, they gave you an out with that last season of Iron Fist because they're on the trail of another Iron Fist. So I think you can replace, his name has even slipped my mind
Finn
at this
Jones.
point. Yeah, Finn Jones as that actor. So I think I hope they keep Michael Coulter. I liked his performance. I know some people kind of thought it was a little cheesy, but I chalked that up more to the writing than I did his performance. I think his performance was earnest and heartfelt, and I think he did a great job. So let me get even weirder with that connection. I know everybody kind of forgot this because Defenders got real weird and didn't really care for it. Does Daredevil find Fin Fang Foom?
Ooh.
I'm kind of excited. Like, when I first started thinking about that, I was like, dude,
I think that's too much. I think that's too much to put in this movie.
Are we going to get it hinted at in the future? Is that the...
I think we'll get a hint of Fin Fang Foom. I do think we'll get that.
But I mean, specifically, is that the tie-in? Like, or especially if they filmed scenes with Charlie Cox, which they're rumored to have been, uh, for this production as well. Are we getting a continuation of the Defenders run? Because if you remember, that kind of ends with him waking up a dragon under New York City. I mean, it plays pretty well into the mythos of the Mandarin and the story that we're going down.
But it goes against, and I know you always say that Feige throws stuff out there but have they said that the Netflix universe is canon?
No, but they also just made a multiverse with Loki. So
true. Yeah, very true.
I mean, they literally can do anything they want to do now.
Yeah, very true. All right, well, let's start.
I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Yeah, let's start wrapping this up. I do want to mention, go back to Wong being in it. Do we see the fact that Wong is in this? Do we see it tying into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness?
Sure. Absolutely. I think that's another easy tie-in. You make sure that that he's available for that. I think part of it is Shang-Chi going to transfer into that movie? I don't know. I think a lot of that will have to will be in how much they lean into the Chi mystical aspect. If they make Chi an extension of the same like mystical magic that Doctor Strange uses, I think you can very easily kind of move him into that world and everything. And they, Marvel has been really creative about how they, give us the characters and their powers and make things kind of linearly line up and make sense. So I think that totally works. And you bring him straight into that movie. I don't know. I haven't heard any rumors that that actor was being used in the filming or anything. So who knows?
But you do think that Wong plays a bigger part than just being a contestant in this tournament?
I hope so.
Okay.
That's what I'll say. I hope so. Speaking of contestants, how can we not talk about that Abomination is apparently in this?
And even not just Abomination. You look at IMDb, it's Tim Roth.
Yeah.
So is Abomination going to talk? I have also seen things that people say, kind of like they did with the Hulk. They said that Abomination's face now more resembles Tim Roth's face. Yeah. And, last time
doing the motion capture and that kind of stuff.
And then last time I had you on the show where we talked about where Loki was going, we did mention this about Abomination. Yeah. Like, is this going to be another reveal like Black Widow had of a Thunderbolts?
Yep.
So
yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming in. So, also other tie-ins, just real quickly, like Inhumans. That obviously didn't really work out. Marvel tried to kind of break out and do its own movie / TV show and all that sort of stuff. But we've seen those characters, and they're a big part of the Mandarin mythos. So you could have something go on with that. You also have stuff like the Mandarin at one point in time is the lead of the organization known as the Hand, which Daredevil is always fighting, and
that was the Defenders.
Yep. There's that tie-in. There's a whole lot of stuff that just underlies this movie that looks like it's a standalone, kind of just on the sidelines, and I think it's going to be deeply tied into the overall story, far more than any of us initially guessed.
Well, and going back to what I said at the very beginning, where I was more, I have agreed with you, but where I was more tying it into the more modern story of the Five Weapons Society. Very recently in the comics, when Shang-Chi took over the Five Weapons Society, even though his plan was he's going to make this evil organization a force for good, a lot of the other Marvel characters don't see it that way. And there's a very famous run where he has to fight Spider-Man.
Yep.
So
who Shang-Chi trains, actually. Yes. So, which is a really, really fun run, by the way.
Yeah. So like we said at the very beginning, although this is a character not a lot of people know about, he's almost a character that's just been moving around in the shadows throughout the last
so many books. It's crazy.
Throughout the last 50 years of comics. Very quietly, and now we're finally bringing him to the mainstream with the MCU and getting his own movie. So I'm excited.
Yep.
I haven't decided yet if this is going to be a run to the theater opening weekend, or kind of let it kind of simmer for a minute before I go see it. I will admit I was a little bummed that it's not going to go straight to Disney Plus, even with the premium. But
I'm on the other side of that. I'm hoping that we're going to see, and not to dive into the divisiveness of this topic, but I kind of hope that they get to where they at least give theatrical runs a month or something before they start popping up, so you get the chance to go and experience it the way big movies were meant to be experienced. But that's just me being nostalgic.
Yeah. But however you plan on seeing it, hopefully we gave you a little bit of background to go into the movie and feel a little bit more prepared for what you're going to see, and the comic background, which is what we always try to make this show all about, is giving you that comic background, the mythos, the stories behind the story. Again, we're talking a character that's been around for 50 years, and so there's a lot behind him, and we hope we gave you a little bit to go in and kind of be able to see some stuff that you may not have been able to recognize without a little bit of comic knowledge. But thanks, Chad, for joining me on this. This was a fun one, because like I said, it was a character I didn't know an awful lot about to begin with, so it was fun to do my research. And I know you enjoyed it as well.
Absolutely.
All right, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramie Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Hello movie viewers and fellow movie lovers. My name is Tim Williams, and I'm the creator and host of Movie Views Presents the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. See, I love the 80s, and I have a great appreciation and nostalgic passion for the classic 80s flicks that birthed my love for movies and ultimately helped shape my childhood. On each episode, I'll discuss, with a special guest co-host of course, a different film from the 1980s. We'll share memories, favorite characters, iconic scenes, and even share some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. We'll discuss famous blockbusters like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Coming to America, Ghostbusters, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, Die Hard, and many, many more. As well as some other cult classics and even lesser-known flicks we discovered on cable TV or the now-defunct video rental stores. Remember those? No matter what 80s flick we choose to talk about, we'll always have a good time, so come and check us out. You can find the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast on major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and more. Be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss a single episode. Once again, I'm Tim Williams, and I hope you'll join me for the next 80s Flick Flashback.